when we are applying that kind of resultant on the requirements, then we can call that as a requirement engineering. If they are okay with all the constraints, then only they will say or they will accept the concepts or a requirements which is given by the customer. And also the format of forms and GUI or a screen prints. User may ask for the illegal, impractical solution, or expert may interpret the requirements incorrectly. Hello everybody, a warm welcome to one and all. Welcome back to the session 2 of B.C.A 6th semester subject called Software Engineering, and we are in the unit 2, that is Software Requirements. I am Rohini TS, lecturer, Department of Computer Science, Vidhyaashram, First Grade College, the Temple of Excellence, MYSURU. So before getting into our today's session, in the last session I have discussed regarding what do you mean by project and what is the use of having the project and who is going to take care about the project, that is project manager. He is a character. He is going to take care about all the planning, controlling, staffing, organizing and complete maintenance of that selection or a sequence of tasks. That is a collection of projects he will be handling. And also I have discussed regarding what is the role of management in software development. So how this management is important in the terms of software development. So when we are developing any of the software, it will be starts with a requirement collection. Up to the deployment or evolution stage, how this management of each phase or a stage will be important. That is what I have discussed in my previous session. And along with that, we have discussed regarding what do you mean by software measurement and what are its types, and then what about this metrics, what do you mean by it, what are the types of metrics we have. So based on that, I have discussed in my last session. So in our today's session, we'll see what is requirement engineering. Already we know about the SDLC model, right? That is software development life cycle. Already we know about each phases of a SDLC. In that first phase is all about requirement. Then what is this requirement engineering? And also requirement engineering process, what it comprises of. And then what do you mean by requirement elicitation process? This is what I will be discussing in my today's session. Let me get into the session that is regarding requirement engineering. Already we know that engineering is like a management, it is an art, it is a discipline which we are going to have a planned or according to certain criteria we are going to follow some of the rules in order to get a particular resultant. So when we are applying that kind of resultant on the requirements, then we can call that as a requirement engineering. It's a process of to gather the software requirements from the clients and analyze and document them will be considered as a requirement engineering. So what they are doing here, analyzed by the customer, they are going to take a requirement. They are going to do that or they will make that as a document. So the collection of all those requirements from the clients, because if I don't know what to do, then we are not able to develop a project. So that it is necessary to develop a project by gathering the requirements. So in this requirement management or a requirement engineering, it's a process of gathering all the software requirements, whatever we require, that is as per the requirements of a customer as well. So it will be collected from the different clients or different end users. I can call that as a stakeholders, so that they will analyze that and they will document them. That process is called as what? Requirement engineering. And main goal of this requirement engineering is to develop and maintain the sophisticated and descriptive system requirement specification document. Very, very important. In short, it will be considered as a SRS. That is system requirement specification. What are the requirements I need in a system to develop any of the software? So when we have that a bundled or gathered collection of the all the requirements which is already analyzed and which is ready for the usage, and also that will be in the terms of documents. So the total process will be considered as what? Requirement engineering. And also here you can see that it will going to be process, that requirement engineering, gathering of a requirement and doing analysis of that and making it documents. So all those will going to include certain processes that may include feasibility study and requirement gathering, and also we have a software requirement specification SRS, and also we have a software requirement validation. So when it comes to the feasibility study, they will just check it out whether it is possible to implement or not. So if it is yes, then they will gather the requirements one by one from the end users or by the customers. So then they are going to specify all the software requirement which is required or which is necessary for the development of a software. So once they are done with the requirement gathering and all its verification, then they will validate it, like done or we have verified and validated according to the customer requirements or not. So that will be at the validation, and also based on certain parameters or a criteria, we are going to have this validation, and in each terminology, like in each step, it will going to perform certain actions or it will going to have certain processes. It will be helpful in order to have this requirement engineering process. So we'll see each step or each of a phase one by one. So feasibility study. So mainly, as I told, feasibility in the sense we are checking whether it is possible or not to implement a software. First, the client or a customer will come to the analyst or a designer or a developer. They will reach out to the particular organization to tell their requirements. Then they will start talking to them. They will converse with them. Then they will get to know what is the requirement or what customer is seeking for, like what kind of software they are expecting, what is their expectation in the terms of product or a project or even as a software. So in the feasibility study, the client will come and they will approach us to the organization for getting the desired project or a product to be developed, and it comes with a rough idea. They don't know much about how it will look like and how it will be implemented. They simply come up with certain requirement. This is what my requirement. I wanted my software to be look like this. That is what they will come up with a rough idea, and all the functions the software must perform and which all the features are expected from the software, that will be collected from the customer by the analyst. Then it will be easy for the analyst to by referring all the information which is given by the client or a customer will be analyzed by the analyst, so that then they will think that whether it is possible or whether it is a desired system to implement or not. So if they are giving simply nonsense requirement, if they are simply giving useless requirement, then also analyst has to understand and they have to analyze whether it is worth of implementing this project. Will it be useful in the future days? Then only they will say okay for that. So then customer will going to give the rough idea regarding what kind of project they are looking for. That is in the feasibility study, and also it will be focused towards the goal of the organization. So here customer and both organization have to be in the win-win situation, right? So that means if a customer is asking for a 5 feature in a single model and they are demanding 5,000 for the 5 features, then even customer has to think, is 5,000 rupees is worth for giving for the 5 features of a particular model. And also organization has to think in the same way. That means, is it worth for our organization? Will it going to take less time? And what about our effort are we supposed to put? By concluding or by by integrating all those parameters together, then only they will say whether it is possible or feasible to implement or not, based on certain criteria, like it will be based on the time, budget, as well as the number of features they are looking for, and whether it will be worthy for the organization or not. Based on all those features, then only they will decide whether it is possible to implement from our organization or not. And also mainly this study analyzes whether the software product can be practically materialized in terms of implementation and also contribution of a project to the organization. Allowing, or if you are okay with any of a project, it also must contribute something to the organization. It must be worthy enough in order to implement that. And also cost constraints as per values and objectives of the organization. If I say okay for any of my customers' requirement, then also I have to think about my organization too. So that includes what is the time constraint we require, what is the budget it will going to include, what are the efforts that we supposed to put, and what are the objectives of the organization. Will it be based on the standards of an organization or not? By looking all these parameters, then they will analyze everything with a customer requirement. If they are okay with all the constraints, then only they will say yes for that. And also it will explore the technical aspects of a project and a product. That technical aspects will going to include, and also they will think about whether it is possible to implement practically. So they are giving just a theoretical requirement specification, but they have to think about practical implementation also. That will going to include its usability, whether it is okay for the maintainability in the future days, and its productivity integration ability. Will it be going to be interoperable with one module to another module? By just looking into all these parameters in the terms of technical aspects and even in the terms of materialistic aspects, practical aspect. So if they are okay with all the constraints, then only they will say or they will accept the concepts or a requirements which is given by the customer. And also the main output of this feasibility study. So this is one of the stage, right, in the requirement engineering. This is the first stage. Then what is the output that I can expect from this feasibility study? So that it should be a feasible study report that contain adequate comments and recommendation for the management about whether or not the project should be undertaken. So it will be like a file, it will reach to the management. Are we okay with the development of this project or not? So if you are doing it, what are the benefit we can expect to the organization, how much cost it requires, what is the time constraint, and what is the budget as well as the effort. By looking into all these criteria, then they will say yes or no for the requirement of a customer what they have bought. So if this feasibility study is okay, so if this not okay, then they won't enter to the next stage. If it is okay, then it will going to reach to the requirement gathering. So only if the feasibility study report is positive, that means if they say okay for all the requirements which is bought by the customer, then only they will come to the next stage called requirement gathering. So in this requirement gathering, as the name indicates, they gather or they will collect, they are integrate all the requirements from the customer or from the end user, and also they will get to know what their ideas and what we should provide and what they are expecting. So all those will going to be included in the requirement gathering. So even this stage also got over. Next what they have to do, that is software requirement specification. In short, it is SRS, software requirement specification. So now I got to know whether it is feasible or possible to implement or not. Then based on the implementation, based on the rough idea whatever they have given, based on that we will going to gather the requirement. After that they are going to have this software requirement specification. So now I am ready to implement this project or a product or a software. Then what are the requirements I require? That is what SRS. So in this, SR is a document. It's like a document. By looking into this document, analyst will going to analyze. By analysis of the analyst, designer will going to design a particular solution. So here SRS is a document which will going to be created by a system analyst. So after talking to the customer or end user or to the stakeholders who are all willing to implement this project, with them they are going to have a conversation based on their requirement gathering. This will going to be created by the system analyst. So that will be collected from various stakeholders. Already I told you regarding the stakeholders, the person or people, one who are responsible for or one who are related to all the activities whatever they are doing in the development of this project. And also this SRS will going to define how the intended software will interact with the hardware. If I am developing any of the software, how it will going to be interacted or how it will going to be interoperable with the other hardware or external interfaces, and what will be the speed of operation, what is the time taken for the response. So the response time needs to be very low, then only we can expect a more speed of operation, that is response time of a system, and also portability of a software, whether it is portable or not, whether it is a platform independent or not. All those things will going to be defined under this SRS. And also the maintainability, will it be easy for the maintenance and speed of recovery. So even after some crashing, or it will be based on some interruption of which occurs during the execution of a program, and also related to its confidentiality as well as the security, quality and certain limitations All these will going to be examined and it will be documented as a documentation form. So all these specification will going to be stored in the SRS. So when you are doing a project, 6th semester project, you also need to concentrate on this stage, that is system requirement specification, whether it is feasible. Yes, then requirement will be collected. The whatever the collected requirements we have, then will it going to be able to perform all these various conditions, then only we can say that it is a well documented SRS. So based on this only they are going to take a further stages. That's why it has to be very clear and it needs to be ambiguity free. And also the requirements received from the clients are written in the natural language, because clients, we can't expect the client to be they must be very well understood with a programming language and they have to code. We should not expect that. Being an analyst or a developer, they have to take a requirement from a client in the terms of natural language, whether like in which language they are comfortable. Based on their language or based on their circumstance, they are just going to give the requirement in the natural language. Then it will be the responsibility of a system analyst to do the document the requirements in the technical language. So they are going to give you the requirements in the terms of natural language. Then analyst has to convert that natural language into technical terminology, which will going to be used by the designer to make them understand, so that it can be comprehended and useful by the software development team. So if they have given in the technical language, then it will be easy for the software development team to understand what is the requirement of a customer. So now, after knowing all these points, we'll see what are the features must be there in the SRS. Already I told you, right? It will be all about document. So then how that document must be? What are the features it must include? We can see here, user requirements are expressed in natural language. This is the first point. Anyway, user will going to give the requirements in the terms of natural language, and also technical requirements are expressed in structured language. So whatever the technical requirements we have in the SRS, that will going to be expressed in the structured language, and it will be used in the organization, which will going to be interacted or which will going to be exchanged between the different analyst or a designer or for the development team. And also design description should be written in pseudo code. So what it is, we are done with the collection of requirements. It will be in the natural language. The technical terminology needs to be converted into structured language. Once it got structure, then it has to be designed. The design document needs to be in the terms of pseudo code. Then it will be easy for them to convert into programming. So that, and also the format of forms and GUI or a screen prints. And also it must include a conditional and mathematical notation for DFTs, that is data flow diagram, how a data is flowing from one object to another object, what are the number of modules we have, how this module should work. All those should be represented in the terms of conditional and mathematical notations or a symbol. So all these, whenever we have as a bundle of document, then we can call that as a software requirement specification. By this, we can easily analyze that what is the requirement of a customer, what they are seeking for, what must be the final product. All those can be seen in this SRS document. So now we have collected the requirement and everything is documented. Now I have to validate that whether they are giving you the genuine requirement. Sometimes what user will do, they will say some requirements. Once it got implemented, then there will be a chances of saying that I didn't say this requirement and I was asking you about another requirement. So in order to minimize all the risk or in order to minimize all the ambiguity, we have a phase called software requirement validation. They will call all the stakeholders, they will call all the client, and they can have a conversation between each other, and they will collect and they will analyze all the requirements, then they will validate. So did you tell this requirement? Yes. If they say yes, then they will validate. It's like a verification as well as the validation. In front of the stakeholders or in front of the customer or an end user, the analyst and the designer, everybody will going to discuss. If they say okay, the customer says okay, then only they will validate it. Because why? Because at last users or end user or a customer should not say this is what I was expecting and this is what my result. That should not be the case. Expectation should match the reality. So that's the reason we have this last stage. So after the requirement specifications are developed, the requirements mentioned in these documents are validated. So now everything got documented, it needs to be validated. It has to be tested whether this is what they are actually seeking for. If not, if they say no, then that requirement will be removed from the document, so that sometimes user may ask for the illegal, impractical solution, or expert may interpret the requirements incorrectly. That means their requirements expectation will be different and my reality will be different. I am going to analyze that in my way and they are going to say their requirements in their way. So in order to minimize all these risks, they are going to have this validation, and requirement can be checked against the following conditions. So how they are going to do the validation here? That means if they can be practically implemented, if it is possible to implement it practically, if they says yes, then they will proceed for the next feature. That is what, if they are valid and as per functionality and domain of a software. So all these are questionnaires validating, they are just having a yes or no. So will it going to, whatever the requirements we have gathered, is it possible to implement it, or in the terms of whether it is valid and it is as per the functionality and domain of a software. So if not, then they will convey the customer, this is not what we are actually seeking for and you need to change your requirements. So if it is okay, then they will also say that all the functionality, it's working based on the functionality, and also these requirements are valid and it is of domain of a software. And also if there are any ambiguities, that means confusions, if there is any confusions, this is what your actual requirement, if not, now only tell us. That is what they will check for the confusions, and if they are complete, whether they wanted to include some more features by tomorrow or a day after tomorrow, so can we validate right now? That is what they are checking, whether it is complete or not. If not, they have to make it complete, and also if they can be demonstrated, is it possible to implement it or to develop. So by validating all these questions, if all the question got yes, then only they will go for the further procedure. These are the steps what we have in the requirement engineering. I hope you all understood. Let me move to the next slide with a new topic, that is requirement elicitation process. What is requirement elicitation process? So here you can see it's a diagrammatic representation, right? Like how this elicitation process will going to take one phase or one stage one after another. You can see here, we'll see the stages of this requirement elicitation process. This elicitation process comprises of, what is the first phase we have? That is requirement gathering. Already we got bored of this requirement gathering. Already we collected, we have gathered all the requirements from the different stakeholders and even from the end user customers, from everybody, right? Then requirement organization, let me discuss it later. And also we have a negotiation as well as the discussion. At last, what it includes? That is requirement specification. So we'll see each stage one by one. What is the first phase that we have here? That is requirement gathering. Already we have gathered it. Let me move to the next one. That is organizing requirements. I have certain number of requirements here based on its importance, based on its urgency, and even based on its convenience. I am just going to make, or I will just arrange all the requirements based on all these criteria. That is what requirement organization. So once it got organized, once it got collected, then negotiation and discussion. How it will going to take place? So as I told earlier, if the requirements are ambiguous, that means if there is a confusion, it is not clear, at that time they will take the various stakeholders or customers and they will negotiate and discuss with all the stakeholders. They will call all the stakeholders or a customer, then they will discuss with each other. After the negotiation, the requirements may then be prioritized and reasonably compromised, so that after having a discussion or a conversation, either developer or analyst should compromise, or even stakeholder should compromise with a certain functionality or a features. So that will going to be done in the negotiation and discussion. That negotiation can be related to budget, time. Like for example, if the stakeholder is seeking, or if they are wanting their software to be developed within 1 month, at the time the analyst or a developer may ask another 15 days or 10 days for the development of a software. That is what negotiation. It can be in the terms of money, effort as well as the time, and that the requirements come from various stakeholders mainly to remove the ambiguity and conflicts. So they are discussed for clarity and correctness, and then unrealistic and which is not possible requirement is there, that will going to be removed. So that is what we are going to do in the negotiation as well as in the discussion phase. So at last what we have, documentation. Whatever they have discussed, whatever they have prioritized or gathered, all those needs to be in the file form, that is should be in the documentation form, all the formal and informal, and what is the functional as well as the non-functional requirements, everything will going to be documented, well documented, and it will be useful for the next phases of a processing. So all these will comes under the requirement elicitation process. Then what are the methodology we have in order to perform this requirement elicitation process? So already we have discussed regarding the requirement elicitation process, isn't it? So it's a process to find out the requirements for an intended software system by communicating with the client, end user, system user and other user who have a stake in the software system development, who are all belonging to this SDLC or a software development life cycle. All the people will be gathered together and they will be have a conversation. They will collect the requirement from each of the type of stakeholders or a client or from the end user. Then they are going to make that as a file or a documentation. Then what are the techniques or a methodology we have in order to gather or in order to collect all these requirements? So here we have a list of requirements gathering techniques that includes interviews, surveys, questionnaires, task analysis, domain analysis, and it can be of brainstorming, and also we have a prototyping and then observation. Just by looking into this wordings, you can understand what interviews, how can I get a requirement by interacting with the people, what is this surveys, what is questionnaires by asking the question. So let me discuss all these type of or ways of collecting the requirement in the requirement elicitation process in my coming session. I hope you all understood. It's all about my today's session. In my coming session, we'll see what are the requirement elicitation techniques we have, which I have listed in the previous slide, and also we'll see software requirement characteristics. What are the requirements or a software requirement specification characteristics we have, and also we'll see about the categories of this software requirement. I hope you all understood. Let me meet you in the next session. Until that, keep learning, keep on growing. Thank you.